once you figure out that things like confidence, self-esteem, self-worth, grit, fortitude, mental toughness, all of these things are in you, you just haven't developed them, you're missing really the entire potential of your whole life by not developing those skills. And I believe that we are taught that those are traits to prevent us from working to develop those skills.
Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results. But if you're ready to level up your life and get results that truly matter in your health, business, mindset, and relationships, then this is the podcast for you. Welcome to Scheer Madness, where we have unscripted, real conversations with the world's top athletes, entrepreneurs, and coaches. Discover real-world and tactical advice from the best in the business. Let's go.
Hey everyone, Rachel Scheer here, and welcome back to the Scheer Madness Podcast. Right now, I am up at the First Forum headquarters about to do a podcast with the one and only Andy Frisella. And I'm so excited about today's episode, not just because Andy is an all-around badass, changing millions or even billions of people's life with the work that he's doing with First Forum, 75 Hard, his podcast, Real AF. But today we're going to be talking about mental health. And this is a topic that is super close to my heart because of what I walked through myself, my upbringing, my family who's really struggled with mental health. My father actually has been homeless and physically disabled. So today is so important for me and the message that we really want to share. And we're going to be talking about pharmaceutical use, Andy and I's story of trying to walk through coming off of antidepressants, but also what are some holistic methods we can really lean into for improving our mental health. Things like exercise, functional medicine testing, gratitude, purpose. We're going to be covering all of this in today's episode. So let's dive in. Well, I wanted to first start the conversation, and I meant it yesterday that I felt like it was God-given that you brought up everything about what you've been walking through with coming off an antidepressant. And I wasn't even going to ask you to even come on my podcast because I was like, okay, Aaron already asked him. Like, I'm not going to be that person. But I truly felt like God was like, this is something like we really do need to talk about. And I know for myself, it's something that I've struggled with talking about publicly. And nobody actually even knows this, but I was put on an antidepressant when I was 16 years old. And I was the normal moody teenager where, I had acne and I had all of these emotions and high school drama, and kids are just so mean. And my parents just didn't want to deal with me. And they're like, bringing me to the doctor, threw me on Lexapro, which was exactly what you shared with me that you have been trying to come off of. And 15 years later, where my brain is literally still developing, it's been the hardest thing in the world to get off of it. So one, I appreciate you sharing that with me and coming on, because I think we need to talk about this a lot more.
Yeah. It's my pleasure. I try to be transparent as possible because I realize that I'm in a position where if I'm not, people can sometimes look at people who are doing, things in life and accomplishing things and building things, and they think that they don't have any struggles or they're not dealing with the same kind of things that they are. So I try to be almost weirdly transparent, and talk about things that I think most people wouldn't, but we were talking in the kitchen and I had mentioned to you that, I was coming off of 10 years of Lexapro at a 20 milligram dose. You were like, well, you want to talk about it? I'm like, yeah, we'll talk about it. But I think it's important because, like you mentioned in your story today, a lot of the science that they've based the antidepressant market on was based upon the idea of chemical imbalances. And there's recently been some studies that have come out and shown that that's not even the truth of what they've been trying to market. So that's kind of what got me thinking about wanting to get off of it, because I had put the last 4 years into really developing my mental fortitude, and I felt like I was in a good place. And I felt like, well, dude, if I was going to be able to get off of it, because I read the horror stories and I read, how hard it's been for people to get off. And I just figured, that this would be a good time. And The truth of the matter is it's probably been the hardest 6 to 8 weeks of my adult life, to be completely honest. And what it's made me realize is that, and what I suspect and believe, and I don't know that I don't have any proof to this, but it certainly seems like they make it extremely hard for people to get off on purpose, because it is insane.
Yeah. And it's really, really scary too. And I know I've tried to come off of it at least 3 times during my life. And even trying to explain it to my family or even my partner about like coming off of it, like they don't get it. They're like, you're fine, like just come off of it. And for me, I actually had my very first panic attack when I tried to come off of it, where I literally thought I was dying in that moment. Like everything was like, crawl out of my skin, get out of here. And I then had PTSD after, just from the panic attack, and I got back on a small dose, and I wouldn't wish it on anybody. And I think what's so scary about that too is being so dependent on something. And I was even talking to some people yesterday about it, and you know, with where the world's at right now too, like it's one thing to be on like blood pressure medication or, you know, something for like high cholesterol, where if shit went down, like you could still survive without that. The scariest thing ever is if, for whatever reason, the government was like, you have to do this or we're not giving you your medication. Like people would literally be suicidal without that medication. And that's where I wanted to get off of it. And I thought nothing of it for the longest time. And I didn't know what symptoms it even was causing, because I was, 16 getting on it. I know there has been more apathy, I think, for sure, being on it, because as I came off, it was like, where the heck is all of this emotions coming from? Sure. But I think that's like really the scariest piece, I mean, that's consistent with what I've been experiencing. Things I've been experiencing are that, it's almost like a slingshot back into having emotions. And you don't know, I didn't notice when I was on it how numb I was, because I was on it for so long. And now that I'm off of it, I'm having emotions again. And because I'm not having emotion, I haven't had them for so long, I'm having to relearn how to like control them and like deal with them. And it's inconvenient, because when you're not used to having them like that, it can be cool. It can be hard, but I actually think it's pretty cool, because it's showing me like, okay, well, this is how you're supposed to feel when this happens, or when this happens, and when this happens. And for a long time, there would be things that were happening in my life that I knew I should be more upset about than what I was, right? Or more excited about than what I was. And it kind of feels good to have those feelings again, but it wasn't expected. And the slingshot anxiety that I got from coming off of it, like you mentioned, having a panic attack, that's how it's felt for me for the whole time. Up until literally the last couple days, where I've started to feel better. And I'm not sure why. It's been about 6 weeks, so I think that might be why, but it's been massive anxiety. I explained it to you the other day, like it's like standing at the edge of a roof and trying to walk the edge of the roof, and like having that wobbly feeling on the inside, but like no one could see it from the outside. And that's the feeling I've had. And I've also had physical symptoms such as like heavy sweats, like night sweats. Do you have nightmares at all? I had terrible nightmares.
No, but I haven't slept very well. Vertigo. So vertigo's been something that like I've been having, where I literally just be walking around and then I start to feel like I'm going to fall over. But those things, the anxiety, the panic, the urgency in the withdrawal process for me were very, very intense. Yeah. And to the point where there was many times where I considered like, well, dude, I should just take this shit. Yeah. And that's what like has really got me pissed off about what's going on, because now I see how hard it would be for someone to get off. And it's almost like they've built in their guarantee of sale to make their money by making it something that people can't even get off of if they want to get off of it. And, doctors say, well, there's no reason to get off of it. Well, if the whole data is based around this one concept that you guys have been pushing for the last 50, 60 years and then they come out with a study that shows that's not true, then what are we on this for? And that's what got me thinking about it. When I started reading that data, and I'm like, well, what is this actually doing? You know what I mean? What is this doing to me? And I worked with my doctor, and I would say this for anybody that's like looking to get off of these kind of drugs, you need to have a strategy to do so, because it's not something that you're just going to want to do like and just stop taking. You're setting yourself up for a really hard time by doing that. And so, yeah, I just started weaning my way down, and then got off completely and just kind of grit and took what it gave me. And it's been hard as fuck, man. But at the same time, I think I can see the light at the end of the tunnel in terms of what I'm going to gain from that. And so I think it'll be worth it. But I think, anybody who's considering it or anybody who's done it, I've had a lot of people, I've talked about this on my show, so I've had a lot of people reach out, tell me their story of it. And it's very consistent. It's across the board.
And it's a ton of people.
Yeah,
it's a ton, but we don't talk about it.
No.
And every time I brought it up, I'm blown away by how many people are on it and stuck on these medications who want to get off, who attempt to come off, and they literally can't. And I'm right there with you. It was the worst thing I've ever had to walk through. And I've walked through some shitty things in life, and I know you have too, but just the way you feel, and it's can't even describe the feeling. It was this is new. This is I don't know what's going on. And it's this shock factor when you're trying to come off of it, and you're like, is this going to end? And I think that's what leads to a lot of the massive panic. I was in bed for days after I had that panic attack, and I was like, my business is going to be destroyed, relationships. I was like, it is not worth it. And that's where I got back on a small amount. But what was so meaningful to me of you sharing that is you really pushing through and having someone to talk to about it, because I know my partner Aaron loves me and stuff, but he doesn't get it, and immediately people just are like, one, there's something wrong with you because you're on medication to start out with. And then number two, coming off of it, they think that's you going back to just this version of you, and then there's even something even more wrong with you. So there's so much shame around it. And I know that part when I was coming off, I'm like, this isn't me. This is not me. And what's insane is my anxiety was never like that before I got on it.
Right.
And it's a million times worse in that process of trying to even come off of it too. Definitely.
It's very, very consistent with what I experienced too. You definitely start to lose yourself because you can't do anything else. It's just, you just can't. I can understand the idea of, not talk. I haven't talked to a lot of my friends the last couple of months just because of what's been going on. You hit on something there that's super important. Well, two things. One, there is no shame in this. All right. Everybody, there's literally millions of people out there that struggle with this, who are also then influenced heavily to do this as a solution. I was one of those people. At the time, I didn't really realize what, in culture 10 years ago, it wasn't a terrible thing. It was just something that, certain people had to take and certain people didn't. And I did feel better when I started using the product. I was going through one of the most stressful times of my life. Looking back, now that I have a decade past that, it was just a hard time. Yeah. You know what I mean? And it wasn't it was an extended period of hard time. And so, the other thing that you mentioned that I think is important is that, the way I felt the last 5 or 6 weeks trying to come off of that is absolutely not who I am. And, I have a very strong sense of who I am and what I am. And I know that. But for someone who may not, someone who may still be in the process of trying to figure out, exactly who they are or what they stand for or what kind of life they're living, or really, in a less stable spot than I am mentally, dude, you could get off. I could see where someone could get off of that and be like, holy shit, I am crazy. Yeah. You know what I mean? Because the backlash of the bad symptoms is so heavy that you do feel even me, I had to talk myself out of it many times. Look, dude, this isn't you. You're dealing with this, you got to keep pushing. And the way I was able to look at it is how I look at life anyway, which is, when times are hard, I don't stop. I just continue to step forward and manufacture daily wins until I catch that momentum again, So I broke it down to basics. Said, all right, well, my goal is to win today. I'm going to do these things today. And then I try to do it again tomorrow. And once I was able to string together, 5 or 6 days in a row of legitimate solid wins, I started feeling a little bit better. You know what I mean? I get little glimpses of who I really am and start to feel more who I really am. And another thing I noticed too is as much as the emotion rebound is like extreme, meaning like for someone who doesn't understand what we're talking about, when you're taking these medications, from my experience, you do feel numb and apathetic to almost everything. Like you understand things are good or bad, but as far as
relating to somebody,
like it's kind of like, well, it is what it is.
Like feeling what other people feel.
Yeah, that's very hard to do. And when I removed it, the rebound effect of those emotions went from not having too many to having way too many, and feeling like, having like I was going through these emotional, like crazy, like ups and downs and high emotion spells where I would just start crying for no reason, like shit like that. And that was like really bad in the beginning. Like the first 3 weeks was like really heavy that way. And then it started to subside, and it's gotten better and better and better. If this is something that anyone is considering, you have to be able to look past that, 60-day mark and remember like you are going to return back to that version of yourself that you know who you are. You know what I mean? And I think that's an important point to point out, because the way these things are built, from what I can tell, the minute you take them out, it creates that reaction, and then you think you really need them again.
And then you get back on it.
That's right.
I'd say even when I was like trying to find like stories of people coming out, like hope stories, and like researching, I'd say like every single one I found was like people who like tried to get off of it and then got back on it. And I was like, shit, like, is this like just like what's going to happen is like people's life went to shit and all this stuff. Now, I think too, like there's a lot of other things that these people could have done for sure. And you worked so hard also like on your mental health, physical health, fitness, and all of those other different things where you're in, like you said, the best place possible to ever come off of it. So I think it is important for someone coming off to try to get those things in place first and foremost. Like
absolutely.
Exercise, move your body, really dive into also doing the work on yourself. And I'm even sometimes curious of like how much of healing was even maybe suppressed with even being on it. I mean, I was 16 years old and here I am 29 and trying to come off of it. And it's like, who even am I? Like, right? Like there's that question there. Yeah. And I was never on a high amount. I was on 5 milligrams, put on it. So it's nothing even major. But I remember this one time I was struggling, like normal life struggles. Like you said, like we go through hard shit. And I truly believe if we can't feel all of the pain, it also numbs us from feeling all of the joy and all of those life experiences too. Like you can't suppress one without suppressing the other.
I found that to be the case.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I went to a psychiatrist because I actually was my first time attempting to come off. And I remember going in and being like, I'm trying to come off. And what physicians do is they diagnose based off of symptom clusters, if you're familiar with that, where you go in and you're like, I am depressed, I have anxiety, these are my symptoms. And then they say, well, you have anxiety, you have depression, and we need to treat you with medication. So it's like, what do you have? What is the symptoms? And then they give you a label. And I think also that label in of itself is very disempowering because it says there's something wrong with me, and that's where that shame factor really comes in. But I went into the psychiatrist with the goal of coming off, but having some of those symptoms, right? And seeking help. And he was like, well, you fit all of the symptom cluster criteria for depression. And I know you're on 5 milligrams, but you really actually should be on 10 milligrams because that's actually the clinical dose that they use for depression. And I remember walking out with a higher dose medication, and I just was like, what the fuck? Like, what just happened? I was trying to come off of it. Now I'm leaving with a higher dose on this. And then I just was pissed after because I was like, how, like, I'm sharing that I want to come off, and these are just the symptoms of coming off, and I get put on more. And I think part of the diagnostic criteria is really part of that too. And I think it was the 1960s where they started saying that it was the chemical imbalance in the brain of low serotonin. So with SSRIs, I'm a big nerd when it comes to like how these things work, but they block the reuptake of serotonin back into the brain. So it's like this door that's shut. So there's more firing on that neuron. But what happens over time is as the neurons are firing in this like empty space, we have these enzymes that eat them all up. So you feel better at the beginning, but eventually a lot of these enzymes eat up those serotonin that's firing. And then when you come off of it and that door opens for them to kind of go back home, you don't have as much as you had before. And that's what leads to like the full depletion now. And like those like truly actually chemically imbalances where you get like the brain zaps and things like that too. So I think it's just, there's also something impaired with our diagnostic criteria. And not a lot of people know this, but like, because I was put on that with a whole laundry list of other medications, Accutane as a kid because of the acne, which is also terrible for your mental health, birth control for hormones, a ton of antibiotics and everything is like, and an antidepressant is the reason why I do now functional medicine and holistic health, because I know there's so many other methods that I wasn't given when I was a kid. And I felt like no one really fought for me. And now I get to fight for myself and I get to fight for other people too, to figure out what the root causes truly are. But that was incredibly frustrating in of itself. And I've found, with a lot of my own research, there's many causes, right, of depression. There's, you can have gut imbalances, which is, I'm super passionate about like the gut and everything. Most of our serotonin is literally made in the gut. It can be deficiencies, omega fats, so first form, like we utilize omega-3s, vitamin D. They show that can actually lead to some of those symptoms. Hormones, thyroid, it can actually be toxins. I've had people who came back with mold toxicity or heavy metals like mercury, and those cross through the blood-brain barrier. So there can be like literally things that are off still in the body that are causing, neuroinflammation or other things. But on top of that, I think the biggest thing is really unaddressed trauma. And I think that's really the biggest thing, because I've watched my dad, and why mental health is so important to me is my dad's actually homeless. My dad struggled with his mental health his whole life. I could get emotional. He struggled with his mental health his whole life, and he was really abused as a kid. It was never addressed in my marriage with my mom and dad. And that separation, and that's a whole nother story to get into. His mental health just continued to decline. And then he became physically disabled and could no longer walk. And as a byproduct, he created like this whole alternate reality, because being in the present world was so painful. They diagnosed him schizophrenic and all this kind of stuff. But I'm like, my dad wasn't always that way. And I think it was like, it became so painful over time that his brain, not like consciously, was like, we can't even be in the world anymore. So we're going to create another reality of it all. And now he's been homeless actually for a period of his life. And I've watched that and I've wanted to help him in so many ways. So like, it's really, really crucial for me, like with figuring out like those root causes and people really understanding that. But I truly think it's that trauma that gets so suppressed manifests in all of these different ways that really truly is, in my opinion, the biggest root when it comes to mental health.
Yeah, I think that's a big cause. I also think you hit on it in the beginning when you talked about having, your fitness habits in check. I totally agree with what you said about people getting their discipline level to a point where you can handle training, once or twice a day to get through this. Physical activity has been something that has helped me pull through this. At the most anxious times, I'll get up and I'll go do like a run walk, or I'll do even a walk, hill walk or something like that, or lift, right? I've been making extremely sure that my diet is very clean. I'm getting a ton of water. These are all, I'm reading. I use my program, the 75 Hard program, Live Hard program. But like, regardless if you use that or not, all of the things that are in it are things that will help you get your mind to a place where you're not preoccupied with all the fucking bullshit. If you're someone who's sitting at home and, you're very unhealthy, you're not training, you're not drinking water, you're going to have a much more difficult time trying to push through. And honestly, I can't even imagine doing it like that, to be real. I don't think I would recommend it, because one of the things that has really helped me get through has been the physical activity. And honestly, it's been weird because this last year I had a shoulder injury where I had to have a major reconstructive surgery on my shoulder. I tore pretty much everything in it last year, and it was a year-long recovery. And so I had to this whole year I've been half-ass training, and that's even got me in a weird spot on top of all of that. So, being able to train, putting good things in your brain, not scrolling mindlessly for hours and hours and hours, not getting too caught up. I've distanced myself from Instagram in terms of how much time I'm spending on there. I read an interesting book. I'm reading an interesting book called The Chaos Machine right now, where it talks about how they actually intentionally mentally manipulate you to keep your attention on that phone. And if you read it, it's very eye-opening, and it definitely makes you see social more as a tool that we can use and less as a place to spend all our time and energy. Making sure that I'm getting my reading in. That's a huge thing, dude. Like sitting down at a minimum of 10 pages. I usually get I knock out, 25 to 30 pages. And I'm a slow reader, but that mental break, that mental 1 hour break that it takes me to do that has been very helpful for me to reset and push through the very difficult times. It's really hard to feel anxious when you're fucking tired. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
When you're beat and you're tired from lifting or tired from doing a cardio session or even a couple sprints or whatever. I mean, dude, that releases that. You cannot feel anxious and winded at the same time. Praying is something I think that has helped me through. I don't think people really give enough credit to how powerful that can be for getting you in a peaceful place internally. Being open with the people around me with what's going on has been very helpful. The people closest to me that I talk to every day, they're all aware of what's happening. That way, when because there's been a couple times where I've had very hard days while I'm doing this, but whatever the reason is that and by the way, if you're not on the SSRIs and you're not on any of these drugs, a great way to cure and fix your mental health is literally by doing those exact same things I just said. Yeah. So, a lot of it can be prevented. Most of the people that they diagnose for depression are just in a funk, right? You're going to be depressed if you spend 4 hours a day watching TV. You're going to be depressed if you spend another 4 hours a day on the internet. You're going to be depressed if you're 100 pounds overweight. You're going to be depressed if you're not drinking water. I mean, if you're consuming all these highly refined sugars all day long as your main source of calories, dude, you're going to feel that way. You're going, and the hard part is you're going to feel like such shit that you don't even realize how shitty you feel until you get it out of your system. That really makes me feel bad for a lot of people. When you go to the grocery store and you see people, you look at their cart and you see, regular soda, chips, all the regular foods that we're taught in America as are the norm things. And, you see these people, and I'm not knocking anybody. I used to be 350 pounds. Everybody knows that. So but you see these people who are morbidly obese. They're struggling to move. They feel like shit. And it's yeah, bro.
It makes sense.
Yeah.
You feel that way.
Yes,
yeah.
You look around, look how you're living. And I think a lot of this can be prevented by the mentality of just a little bit of productive or preventative maintenance. You know what I mean?
That requires people to take responsibility.
Yeah, people don't like that. But, when it comes to, we only get one life, man. We only have one life. We only have one opportunity to be happy and to not feel crazy our whole entire lives. And I think it's important that, to set up, at least for me, if you're going to be a productive human, I have a lot of responsibility, so I don't have a choice. But if you don't have a lot of responsibility, maybe the reason that you feel like shit is because you don't have any. You know what I mean? And you're not taking any. So we as humans have tremendous potential. We are not meant to be, big fat sloths on the couch.
Have you seen WALL-E with those guys in the outer space that are just the big blobs in the machines? It's a kid's movie, but it's literally them foretelling the future, where they're just all have computers and they're these giant blobs and they're in these chairs and they're rolling around of these huge overweight. And just controlled by technology.
Yeah, the further people dip into technology and the more they get sucked into the metaverse and Web3 and all of these things, the more they go in, the worse they're going to feel. Everybody should go read that book, The Chaos Machine.
The Chaos Machine.
It'll give you a different perspective.
I haven't read that, but I'm going to definitely read that now. And I love that you mentioned, a lot of the things that you found that have helped you. Like for me, I'm a very routine person, and if I were to just go based off of my wiring and my upbringing, I am like prone to be an anxious person. I am prone to have a lot of those just with my wiring and upbringing. And I always tell all of the people that I work with, or even talk about on my podcast, like I have to then step into the version of myself that I want to be. And I only can do that because of exercise and fitness. And that's why I've, worked out for as long as I had. I had a guy ask me one time in the elevator, and he was like, how long have you been training for? How long have you been working out? I was like, and he's like, how have you stuck with it for so long? I was like, well, I was a gymnast, I was a dancer, and then, I got into weightlifting. I was like, I don't know, I'm an athlete.
Yeah.
I said my whole life.
Yeah.
And it was because it wasn't something that I was doing, it was part of who I am. And I think that's helped me a lot, is I'm the kind of person who chooses to do what's hard. I don't wake up expecting to, especially like coming off of meds, but even a lot of us, like we like have the expectation, I'm just gonna wake up full of energy, joy, excitement, and you can have those things, but you have to create those things really ultimately. You
Absolutely.
have to wake up and be intentional, because I have a beautiful life. Like I have such a beautiful life. I'm so grateful for it and blessed by God to have it. But I still wake up and have days where I'm like, man, I just brain fog. I feel in a slump, and I'm doing all the right things for me. And then I do my morning routine. I've done reading for periods. I'm really into meditation right now myself. I'm not sure if you've dove into meditation. That's helped me, prayer, and then moving my body. So I have to do those two things every single day. Something for my mind, and it's evolved over time, reading books, personal development, things that I can feel like I'm growing in, at least, journaling, writing intentions, meditation, and then some kind of movement. And I think if people could do those two things in the morning, like they would make a massive difference in how they feel throughout that day. And then just like you said, tackle it as that one day. Like that one day, like how can I feel my very best today? And then you start to create these small little wins, and you're like, this isn't so hard, to really essentially do.
Absolutely.
I know you talked a little bit yesterday too about, like, there was 3 things, right? You said in our conversation. Yeah. I know we talked a little bit about fitness. You mentioned too purpose.
To me, there's 3 things that equate to happiness. A lot of people spend their whole life looking for happiness as if it's something that they're going to discover. And I think that's the wrong perspective. I've never been walking down the street and discovered happiness. Anything I've ever been happy about, it's because I've had certain elements correct and aligned in my life. And those 3 elements are, 1 is discipline. When you're exercising discipline or you're not exercising discipline, it drastically affects how you feel about yourself. Because, if I have a problem with alcohol and I don't have the discipline over this drink, I'm going to feel powerless in every single area of my life, because we all know how silly it is for some sort of external source that has it's not even a being, have power over us. Okay. So the first thing is we have to take our power and develop our power of discipline through exercising discipline. A lot of people think discipline is a trait, when in reality it's a skill you develop. And so you have to practice being disciplined to grow a discipline muscle, right? That's the first thing, so that we can feel like we're somewhat in control of our environment. Now, are we in control of everything? Absolutely not. We could be walking across the street and get run over by a bus. We don't know. But at the end of the day, we should have enough discipline to be able to control what inputs and outputs we produce with our being, right? The second thing is purpose. If we don't wake up every day with a purpose, and that purpose can be big, I think a big purpose is a great place to go. Because when your purpose is big, it's really hard to fulfill. And when it's hard to fulfill, that means there's a lot of work to do. When there's a lot of work to do, it's hard to get your mind idle to where you get to that place of like, I'm dissatisfied, right? A lot of people think that happiness equals sitting on the beach with a fucking Corona with their feet up, right? Like, that's not happiness. That is like one little moment of your whole entire life. The happiness is going to come from your daily actions. And so having a big purpose with a lot to do and a lot of work to do, it sounds counterintuitive because people look for the easiest path. But the reality is that when you have a lot to do, you never run out of purpose. So you always feel like you're needed, you're valuable, you're contributing, and that's a human need that we all have. And then the third thing is gratitude. It's really hard to feel anxious. It's really hard to be upset whenever you have gratitude. And when you have all three of these things, right? When you have discipline that allows you to feel in control, you have purpose, a reason for being, a reason to get up, a reason to go and work, and it's big enough to where, you have a lifetime of work to do. And then also the gratitude, when things are bad, they're really not that bad if we're being completely honest. If you're watching this show or you're listening to this show, you're doing better than 99% of the people on this planet. And I think that's an important thing to remember. So whenever I found myself not happy, it's because one of those things is out of alignment. It's usually my discipline, because the discipline is the easiest thing to go and have high and have it be a perishable skill where it just kind of goes away real fast if you allow it. And then when it comes to purpose, for me, a big purpose is easy because I have lots of employees and lots of projects going on. But for most people, they might not have anything going on. So they're thinking, well, what's my purpose? Well, dude, at the beginning, your whole entire purpose could be yourself. It could be, I'm going to get through this day doing these 5 critical tasks, and I'm going to do it again tomorrow. And that's what 75 Hard and Live Hard's about, because it creates a purpose for a short period of time where you can allow yourself to make massive progress in a very short period of time, in your discipline, also in your purpose and in your gratitude. And that's why when people finish the program, a lot of them are like, well, I don't want to stop. Well, no one says you have to stop, right? Those 3 things, I think, are the key elements to being happy. I think people need to understand that creating happiness is a skill. It is not like when you look out there, and yes, there is some people that have a happy demeanor, or they're happier naturally, maybe at a baseline than you are. Or they're just really good at pretending to be happy. We don't know. But at the end of the day, we can all manufacture happiness by taking care of ourselves. And in the beginning, when your life, when you're at the very bottom right now and you're looking around, you're like, holy shit, dude, my life is fucking at its bottom. Okay. Well, what are you going to do about it? You know what I'm saying? Like, let's win today. Let's drink a gallon of water today. Let's train. Let's go on a walk today. Let's train with some weights today. Let's read 10 pages of a productive book that's going to put you in the right mindset. Let's practice gratitude intentionally for, a dedicated amount of time. Like, these things that we do daily are what create the fulfillment and the happiness that we have. And I don't have all the answers, but I can tell you that the more that I go down that route and the more fine-tuned I get on that formula, the happier I am. Yeah. So I felt like that's been a huge game changer, especially the last 2.5 years with all the craziness going on in the world. A lot of us, dude, like what we just went through, that's not how people are supposed to live. We're not supposed to turn on the TV and hear doom and gloom 24/7 and scare tactics and lies. We're not supposed to be locked in our homes for 1.5 years. Kids aren't supposed to be locked out of schools for 2 fucking years. Like, the mental, husbands and wives aren't supposed to be locked up in the house together for 2 years, dude. Like, the divorce rate's at the highest rate it's been. We have this situation going on externally that I think everybody should remember is very difficult for everybody. It's been a very, very difficult 2.5 years. And a lot of people are suffering, but the suffering can end the minute you decide that you want to take back control of your life. And I think that's the important thing. We can't control, as much as I wish I could, I can't control what happens in the world. But what I can control is what I do. And by me doing what I can do, I hope that other people will notice that and they will improve themselves too. And I think that if we all, as, Americans, or citizens of humanity of the world, took a little more responsibility for the examples that we set. And I'm not saying be perfect, because I'm far from perfect. I'm not a perfect human by any means, but I do the best I can. And when I fuck up, I try to fix that. And I think if we all raise our standards higher, we will have a better place in society where everybody can be happier, because, if everybody's happier, then everybody's happier, and that starts with your own example that you put out into the world. And so I've started to look at it a little differently in that regard. And that's why when you ask me to come on and talk about it, I'm willing to, because, the truth is, look, man, I'm just a normal person. Is it embarrassing that I had to go on antidepressants? Not really. Like, fuck, dude. Like, you know what I mean? Like, we don't know what we don't know. You know what I mean? And we're all learning as we go. So if people listen to this and they, and they find it helpful, which I hope they do, that's a good thing. You know what I mean? I feel like that's something that we should all do a little bit more of, is tell them the truth about. And I'm not saying make an identity out of being a victim, but, when you have a struggle, maybe talk about it and let people know that this was a struggle for me, and I think that's helpful for people, especially when they see people who are doing well financially or building things, or, even if it's your next door neighbor that you just, you have a conversation out in the backyard and they're talking about the things that's going on, and, those things inspire people, man, and when you see people doing well, it makes you want to do better. And so, I think we should all take it upon ourselves to do those things. We should be the person that is building the story that other people should look at and say, well, if they can do that, I can do that too.
Yeah. And I know for even people listening to hear like me and fitness and functional medicine and holistic health, that like, holy shit, I was put on an antidepressant, Andy was, and every time I've had these conversations, everybody's like, me too, I've really, really struggled.
Right.
But also, just like you said, like we didn't really have like any other information. It was, here, you're depressed, this will help you. And I think like we trust our doctors, right?
Yeah.
Like
we should.
We trust our doctors.
We should be able to. There's a reasonable expectation. That's a whole nother thing going on in the world. We have a reasonable expectation to trust the media. We have a reasonable expectation to trust the government. We have a reasonable expectation to trust doctors. And unfortunately, because of the influence of big pharma and the money that's available there, that trust has been corroded and been damaged deeply. And it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard for me to ever trust traditional medicine ever again after what just went down.
And that's the exact reason why I got into this line of work, is because I stopped really trusting traditional medicine. And I'm never against anybody taking medication, but I am pro getting to the root cause. And everything we've even talked about today, like for the listeners, we've covered a whole bunch of stuff between what I've mentioned, between more of the functional, the holistic side, with everything you've mentioned from lifestyle and fitness and purpose and gratitude. Like there's a lot of things that we can be doing right now immediately to feel better and to overcome a lot of these things. And there's a lot of other different areas. If we're doing all of that, we can even dive into to dig a little bit deeper there before we just immediately go to the pill and jumping on that.
Most of what we talked about in terms of like the depression and the anxiety can be cured with truly just living a healthy lifestyle. And it's not that hard. Like, people think, oh, I don't have time for all that fitness stuff. It's like, dude, you don't have time to not do it. Like, that's what you're not understanding. Right. Like you're not seeing that you'll waste your entire life by not taking control of the situation right now. You'll spend your entire life doing exactly what you did yesterday for the rest of your 60 years on earth or whatever it is you might have. And you're going to look back and you're going to say, damn, dude, like I spent my whole life like this. I spent my whole life like this. Like, dude, that's not something that I don't think anybody wants. You know what I mean? So. Yeah.
And I think even for me, that's been like the hardest part. Is like, I've said to Aaron before, I wish I could not even have a business on social media at points and times, but like, I'm so grateful that I get to spread my story and my message and help other people with conversations just like this. So there's like that part that's incredible, but also too, like, I know it's massively affected my mental health. And I'm so glad that as a kid, I didn't have social media or any of that stuff. I'd be running and climbing trees and doing all of that. And it's played a massive role. I think, like they said, depression went up by 25% here recently, especially after COVID with the increase of it all. And so I think the biggest message for people is really like low-hanging fruit first, not against medication by any means. And I know some people, have tried so many different things and they're like, okay, I really need the medication. And this isn't meant to never to shame and be like, don't take your medication and get off. It's meant to inspire people to be like, there are so many other things I can do if I'm on medication, if I'm not on medication, if I want to get off of it, if I don't want to get off of it.
All the work I did for the last 4 years on my mental health was done while I was on that. You know what I mean? So like, I don't want people to walk away from hearing this and thinking like that, oh, you're weak because you can't do that. Like, they build these drugs so you can't get off of them. That's what you have to understand. Like, if you don't think that they build these drugs intentionally to create the backlash when you come off that you have to go back on so they can continue to get paid for it, you're not seeing the whole picture. That's what's going on. I mean, what a perfect business model.
Yeah,
right?
Seriously.
Take my protein powder that you can never quit taking.
Yeah, and you take off of it, you're going to be like suicidal, like and your world's going to come crashing down.
When you say like that about another product, right? Hey, drink my water. Here's my water. You drink it, you start drinking it, but you can never stop drinking it. What a perfect business model, right?
Scary.
Yeah, it's fucked up, man.
Yeah. And it's not even like, I know there's like the money side of it too from like the pharmaceutical industry. But I think like even what you talked about yesterday, like, there is a whole nother reason as to why. I think, and a big part of it's the control factor, really, in of itself.
Absolutely.
Same thing with social media. It's like we say it's innocent right here, but they're testing and doing things for a different plan.
Absolutely.
And how scary to be so dependent on something.
Absolutely.
So I think there's just spreading awareness and knowledge about, what we've walked through. And I hope somebody, even if it's one person today, gives them hope or inspiration to take more responsibility for their life and to make some of these changes. And that's so worth it for me.
It is, man. And it's, I wish people would really think about what they're missing out on, because it's not just like looking good at the swimming pool. It's not just having your clothes fit better. It's literally, when you keep promises to yourself day in and day out, and you do what it is that you say you're going to do, and you keep those commitments, and you start to build your discipline, you start to build your mental toughness, and you start to build your grit and fortitude by pushing through things that are hard. The amount of confidence and self-esteem and self-belief that you start to create inside yourself is worth whatever inconvenience or disruption. In fact, it's worth so much that you will start to look forward to those things because you understand what they produce. And that's the chasm that most people have failed to cross, right? Like, they're not attaching the idea of how good they feel mentally, how good they feel self-esteem wise, how much confidence they have when it comes to taking care of themselves. They're looking at the aesthetic part of it. And that aesthetic part of it is cool, right? Like,
that's a byproduct.
Yeah, right. Yeah. That's it. It's just like money in business.
Side benefit,
Like, if you ask most business owners, you say, what are you doing? What's the reason that you're in business? They'll say, well, to make money. That's not the reason you're in business. You're in business to produce value, to produce a result, to serve someone in a certain way. And if you do that at a very high level, the money will be there. And that's the same thing. If you take care of your mental, if you pour into your discipline skill, if you constantly test yourself and constantly work to build yourself mentally, the byproduct is the physical look. But so many people look at the physical look, and that's the only reason they want to do anything, that they can't ever cross over into making it a lifestyle. And that's a shame, because the truth of the matter is once you figure out that things like confidence, self-esteem, self-worth, grit, fortitude, mental toughness, all of these things are in you, you just haven't developed them, you're missing really the entire potential of your whole life by not developing those skills. And I believe that we are taught that those are traits to prevent us from working to develop those skills. I always grew up looking at people who had the ability to stick to a diet, or, I was the person who couldn't stick to a diet for 3 or 4 days, man. The longest I'd ever stick to a diet before I did 75 hard was 6 days, ever.
But it was because it was a diet, right?
That's right.
Like, it was a diet.
Yeah.
I do this for X amount of time to get to X
I just
goal.
had the wrong perspective on it. So I understand what that feels like, to feel like you have zero power and zero control. And I'm telling you, if that's you, invest in building it, because what they don't tell you is you have tremendous potential to feel confident. You have tremendous potential to feel worthy. You have tremendous potential to believe in yourself if you do the little things day in and day out that contribute to that. We spend so much of our lives trying to wonder why, like, certain people got this and we didn't get it. Like, I spent a whole long time wondering why it was that certain people were tremendously disciplined, or certain people had tremendous amounts of confidence and I didn't. And it made me bitter. I'm like, fuck, dude. Like, how come I'm lazy? How come I'm someone who has to work so hard? And I felt like I went down this like little victim path. And what I realized eventually I met James Lawrence, the Iron Cowboy, who ran, he's done some incredible things. He did 50 Ironmans in 50 consecutive days in 50 states. He did 101 consecutive Ironmans, 101 consecutive days. Like, this guy understands what it's about to grit it out. And when him and I became friends, I started realizing that, like, these things are built. These things are not just something that you're gifted with. And once you decide that you're going to start building them, your life is going to improve tremendously. And all the things that you thought you didn't have, all the things you thought that, God, didn't put in you, you're going to discover, actually, I do have those things. And actually, the only reason I felt like I didn't have those things is because I wasn't developing those things. And dude, that's a powerful moment. That's a powerful thing for people to realize. Once you start to realize that you are in direct control of the way you feel by what you do on a day in and day out basis, it's extremely powerful. It gives you an extremely different, just a totally different perspective on life, And my hope is that if you're listening to this, if you're watching this, that you will have enough belief in yourself to go on that journey of trying to develop these skills that we're talking about. Because if you do, I can promise you, your life is going to improve tremendously.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
And I think that's an incredible place. I'm gonna end on that note, because I don't even know if I can go any further, because that's incredible. And I appreciate you more than you know for sharing your story.
Thank you.
It's impacted me, even just our conversation yesterday and today. And I know it's going to impact millions of people's lives with all of the work that you're doing. And I know you talked about purpose. And for me, like, my purpose did start with me of healing and overcoming. Mm-hmm. Like, I should not be where I'm at, in all honesty. Mm-hmm. Like, I fucking should not be where I'm at. Yeah. But I am. And it was, my purpose was me first. And getting out of the place where I had essentially, like, grown up, and what the pattern was of my life, of my family's life, of drinking and drugs, and we foreclosed on our home as a kid, and then mental health issues. And I was, like, determined, that was my purpose, to not stay stuck in that cycle. Mm-hmm. And I did, from at the core, starting with fitness first and foremost, making that the primary part of my life, to then finding purpose through that, to then evolving to some of my own health issues, to my healing, digging deeper, and then creating my business, where now I get to serve, 300 people a month, but then people get to listen through podcasts and social media and all of that stuff. And the purpose has grown because of my purpose for me. Now that I get to spread my purpose and help other people too, really at the core. And I think that's what's so beautiful. And that is, like, been the fire that has kept me going, even on those days where it's like, I don't want to do anything except crawl into bed and put covers over my head in of itself. Yeah. I've even worked with a counselor. I'm a big person for coaches. I'll work with coaches every area of my life. And actually, just this last week, I was struggling. I had a bout of insomnia, and he made me actually go sit in my G-Wagon right now with my little version of myself. Mm-hmm. And he's like, have a conversation with this little version of you. And she's sitting there in the car being like, oh my God, this is my car? Yeah. This is my life? I do what? I help people with what? Yeah. Because of my stuff? Wow. I'm gonna be you? Yeah. Like, I'm gonna be you? I look like that. I'm gonna be you? And it was like this moment of so much gratitude just came over me in that very moment of, if I was that little girl there who was looking up this current version of myself, I'm gonna get emotional again, but I'd be like, holy shit, that's me. Yeah. And that was one of the most beautiful ways to really step into gratitude. And it, like, just changed my entire perspective. And now I do that every morning in my meditation. So I think everything that you've mentioned is so powerful. The last question I have for you is, if you were to go back and give the younger version of you a piece of advice, whether this was the version of you where you were really struggling and overweight, struggling with confidence, or even the version of you in that period when you're like, I need to get on medication, what would you say your biggest piece of advice would be? Man, it's always don't quit. We can't lose in life. We never lose. No one ever loses because of the storms that come in life. They lose because they quit sailing. That's it. We're gonna have bad periods. And that's what I think is dangerous about the idea of social media in the way that it shows highlight reels, right? Like, you look at social media and you say, man, everybody's happy except me.
And by the way, if you read that book, The Chaos Machine, you'll understand why that is. That's an intentional thing that they do. At the end of the day, man, we're going to have bad times. We're going to have bad months. We're going to have bad periods. We're going to have bad years. It's reality. I just had probably the hardest year of my entire life ever. Starting with destroying my shoulder, having surgery I was in the best shape I'd ever been in at 42 years old, and I had to watch it all wither away because like when you have your shoulder, like there's literally, you can't train. You can train your legs, and my legs got great, but like, it's mentally not the same. And so I had to watch it all wither away. We're busiest we've ever been in business. Then, thing after thing after thing after thing, I can name 10 things this year that were like abnormal occurrences, right? So we're going to have these times. But at the end of the day, as long as you keep showing up and you keep working to get better and you practice that principle of trying to improve and move forward, you really can't lose. You can only lose when you stop trying. And I know that sounds corny to people, and I know that sounds basic, and I know that you probably hope that there's something more profound than that. But the reality is that it's all there is. It's all there is. You don't quit. We have this amazing business, and the first 10 years, 10 years in, we were still having days in our retail company where we didn't see a single customer, but we kept showing up, dude. And now we've got something going. And sometimes it just takes a lot longer than what you think it's going to take. In fact, I think it always takes longer than what you think it's going to take. But at the end of the day, these times are going to pass just like the weather's going to pass. And if you're out doing the analogy is like you go outside and it starts raining and you decide to quit and go inside, the work doesn't get done. But if you go outside and it starts raining and you continue to do the work and you get it all done and it's still raining, what difference does it make? Because you still move forward regardless of the circumstances. And I think once you can figure out how to continue to move forward regardless of what the circumstances are or whatever it is going on in your life, which is very simple because continuing to move forward only takes, 3 to 5 real critical tasks every single day. And if you can move forward continuously, even in the hard times, and you don't quit, how can you lose? You can't lose. And that's what, people who are 20, I hope if you're listening to this and you're young and you're just getting started, or even if you're 30 and you're figuring it out and you're like, dude, it really does come down to like that basic advice of just show the fuck up, give it what you got. And when you make mistakes, try not to make them twice. And I think that's the whole key.
Yeah. And I don't think that's corny at all, don't quit, because I actually tell myself daily, especially on the days where I'm like, fuck, I don't feel like I can do this today. Yeah. Like I don't feel like it. Like all of those toxic thoughts just come over. I don't want to, I don't feel like it. First affirmation I use is act in spite of thoughts, feelings, moods, and emotions. That's helped me. Mm-hmm. And I say that to myself all the time when I get in that state. But number 2 is I say, I'm the kind of person who gets up every time I get knocked down. Mm-hmm. I'm the kind of person who chooses to do what's hard. I'm the kind of person who does not ever quit. Right. And that is like how I've been able to, kind of coach myself, self-parent myself through all of those tough periods. So actually that's been a big part of
it's everything, man.
My morning routine. Yeah. I appreciate you coming on my podcast today more than you know, seriously, for taking time out of your busy day to share this message. I know it's going to be incredibly impactful.
Well, thank you for having me. I'm happy to do so anytime.
Yeah. And you guys, I'll go join 75 Hard. I've had quite a few amount of clients who've done it, and it's been life-changing for them. Cool. Yeah, and that's a free program, guys. If you just go to 75hard.com, you can read about it. There's some podcasts in my Real AF feed that go through the whole program. I think it's episode 208. We'll tell you the whole entire program. It's free. So you can go there to find out about it. I'll just show you one of my clients who went through it. He's done all the phases of it all. Mm-hmm. And now he's just like, he's a whole different person, and he's super into personal development. He was like a big overweight guy. And he's like, you and Andy changed my life. That's 100%. Awesome. So we appreciate you. So thank you again for coming on. And everybody, this has been Scheer Madness.